boys and girls. Today is Wednesday, June 10th, 2020. I hope that you are having a great day. All right, what I have planned is another story about earthworms. We are going to take a couple of our popcorn words and I'm going to put them into sentences and model that for you. And that's about it for today. So it's a short lesson, so I need you to do really good listening. So we're going to start off with our popcorn words, reviewing them first. So ready? The first one is run. Ready? Say it. Run, run, run. Good job. Say from. Awesome. Say of. And lastly, because. All right, so I'm going to take two right now. I'm going to take run and from. Let's start with from. And I'm going to put that in a sentence. From. Let's see. From. The card is from me. The card is from me. Okay, you don't have to do anything. You're just going to watch me. The, uppercase T, the card. The card is, popcorn word, from me. M-E is me. The card is from me. One more time, read it with me. The card is from me. Good. All right, awesome. We have a lot of popcorn words here. The is, our new one is from and me. Look at all those popcorn words. 4 popcorn words in that sentence. All right, next. So we did from. Next, we're going to do run today. Run. I like to run in the grass. I like to run in the grass. Okay, ready? I, just watching, I'm going to use a finger space, like to run in the grass. Grass. Period. At the end of the sentence. I like to run in the grass. Oh my goodness. Popcorn word, popcorn, new popcorn word, new popcorn word, or old popcorn word. Wow, all these popcorn words. Okay, you are going to read it with me. Ready? I like to run in the grass. Awesome job. All right. Let's put that over to the side. And our nonfiction book for today about earthworms is this one. This one's one of my favorites. Has so many details and so much good information. This one is different from the other ones in that the illustrator uses photography. So it takes pictures of real earthworms. I think that's why I like this so much. So see, you can see real pictures of real earthworms. Now I know you know what real earthworms look like, but I just like the realistic aspect of it. That's why I really like this book. All right, so nonfiction book, let's start. I have a table of contents and where all things are found in the book, which is characteristic of nonfiction literature. So we have all sorts of worms on page 6 and 7, finding earthworms, page 8 and 9, a worm's body on page 10 and 11, and so forth. So table of contents or contents is characteristic or found in nonfiction literature, which we're reading right today. All sorts of worms. Oh, wait a minute. Am I right? Yes, that's right. All sorts of worms. Dig up any patch of earth in a garden or park. Look closely and you will probably see a wiggly worm. Here it is. Worms that live in the soil are called earthworms. There are several kinds of earthworms. Most earthworms are reddish brown and about as long as your hand. There are many different kinds of worms around the world. Worms come in many colors and sizes. Some are so tiny that they are hard to see. Others, such as the giant earthworm of Australia, are as long as a car. Can you imagine a worm as long as a car? Oh my goodness. The brandling worm has stripy skin. This makes it easy to recognize. So this is another type of worm. We don't see this one around where we live. Finding earthworms. Earthworms live in damp soil. Damp means a little bit wet, where there are bits of dead plants to eat. Most of them live near the top of the soil. Earthworms are easy to find. Dig in the garden with a spade or a fork, right there, large gardening tool. You are sure to find some in the soil. Earthworms live in woods, meadows, and gardens. They live under lawns and among dead leaves, under bushes and trees. Worms also love compost heaps where people pile vegetable peelings and other food waste. And people use that in a garden, okay, because that's also really good food for the soil. There are very few worms in sandy soil. This is because rainwater drains away quickly and the soil becomes too dry for them. Okay, so they like that damp soil. All right, now this page is really important because we're going to be doing a diagram of a worm, meaning you're going to cut out the words and you're going to put them where they are on the worm's body. So let's look right here. I'll go over this throughout the week. Okay, so the front is pointier than the back. The bristles are the tiny hairs found on the worm. The segments are the lines, and the egg pouch or the saddle is where the worm's eggs are made. So saddle and egg pouch, they mean the same thing, okay? A worm is a very simple animal. It has no skeleton, boys and girls, no bones, no lungs, no eyes, and no ears. Its body is a tube made of tiny segments. Can you say that word, boys and girls? Segments. So those are the lines on the worm's body, segments. Each segment is filled with liquid and has bristles that help the worm move. That's how it moves in the soil, the bristles. Okay? It also can anchor to the ground if an animal is like that robin that was trying to eat it the other day from our story. Okay? It's helpful to the worm for movement. Earthworms breathe through their skins. They take in air that is trapped in the soil. On wet days, worms' air pockets fill with water and worms have to go up to the surface. If they didn't, they would drown underground. And we've talked about that. A worm's body is damp but not slimy. The front end is more pointed than the back. So the front, when you're working on your diagram, the front is pointier than the back. Okay, the lines are called segments. The hairs are called bristles. Bristles are the hairs. Okay, and the saddle is the same thing as the egg pouch. Awesome. Feeding. Earthworms feed on rotting parts of dead plants. They have no teeth or jaws, so the food they eat has to be very soft. Sometimes they nibble food with their tiny lips, but usually they suck it up. Worms also feed on soil. They use the good parts as the soil goes through their body. Then they get rid of the waste in what's called a worm cast. We've already learned about that. In the daytime, worms usually stay under the soil and feed on the roots of the dead plants. At night, when it's dark and damp, they crawl up to the surface and search for dead leaves. They drag the leaves underground. A pile of dead leaves is a favorite feeding place for worms. Sometimes they store the leaves in their tunnels until they rot. This makes the soil healthy. Awesome. Moving. Worms have strong muscles to help them move. There are ring-shaped muscles inside each segment. These make their body shrink or spread out. Other muscles run along their body and make it grow short or long. So it allows the worm to be able to stretch and squeeze through the soil. A worm's damp body helps it move easily through the soil. A worm's bristles are very important in helping it move. The worm digs its bristles into the soil and anchors itself. That means it holds on tight and then pulls through the soil, pulls its body through the soil. A worm moves by pointing its head in the direction it wants to go. It anchors the back of its body and the head and becomes thicker. The worm then stretches its body to push through the soil. It anchors the front of its body and brings up the back. All right, so it's stretching and squeezing. Stretch and squeeze. Tunneling. A worm makes tunnels by pushing its way into the soil and eating it. As the worm moves forward, its body coats the soil with slime. This makes the tunnels stronger, but they soon collapse. Some worms burrow deeper underground when the weather is too cold or too dry. They push down to a few feet below the surface, then coil up and go to sleep. They wake when the weather gets better. So yes, they sleep. Do they sleep? They sure do. Mating. Okay, so that's when they make that egg pouch. After mating, the saddle on each worm makes a sticky belt of slime. That's right here. The worm wiggles out of the belt and lays its eggs in it. The belt turns into a hard cocoon. It is smaller than a pea. And you know how small a pea is. A pea is teeny, 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 tiny, so it's really, really small. And then we learn that it slides off. The worm's eggs take many weeks or months to grow in the cocoon. In that time, some of the eggs will die. Sometimes just 1 or 2 worms hatch out of the cocoon. So there could only be 1 or 2 in there. It takes 18 months for a young worm to grow up and lay eggs of its own. So that's 1.5 years, boys and girls. If it doesn't get eaten, the worm may live in the soil for 10 years or more. So that is depending on its environment. And if other animals, other predators have not eaten it, then it can live for 10 years. So that's a pretty good life cycle. Young earthworms are about as long as a thumbnail, which is about this big. They are whiter than their parents, and they have no saddles at first. Otherwise, they just look the same. So there's the comparison right there. So you see the little baby worms, so they're skinnier, and they're a little bit lighter. And the adult is much longer and fatter. Enemies. Okay, enemies of the earthworm. And we have learned about most of these. Worms have many enemies, such as hedgehogs and shrews. Both of these animals are active at night when worms come out to feed. A mole is an earthworm's greatest enemy. Moles sometimes eat 30 worms a day as they tunnel under the ground. They store extra worms in a special pantry. Oh my goodness. Moles keep worms from escaping, are you ready for this? From their pantry by biting off their heads. Ew, gross. This does not kill the worm. Its head grows again, and the worm might be able to escape. Well, that is a very interesting fact if I've ever heard one before. Food for birds. Many birds eat worms. Robins, blackbirds, and thrushes all visit gardens and parks. They look and listen for the tiny movements of earthworms in the ground. When a bird finds a worm, it grabs it by the tail. Worms are hard to pull out of the soil. Do you remember why I said they were hard to pull out of the soil? What part of their body makes it hard for them to pull out of the soil? The bristles, that's right. The bristles, the tiny hairs, they anchor themselves in the soil, and it's really, really hard for predators to pull them out. But sometimes they do win, and the worm loses, okay? But they have very powerful muscles. See, in this case, the worm is definitely lost. Birds hunt for worms in the spring when other food is scarce. That means hard to find. As plants ripen in the summer and fall, birds usually leave worms alone because they have other things to eat. All right, here are some worm wonders. There are over 1,800 different kinds of worms around the world. A medium-sized garden has about 20,000 earthworms in it. That is a lot of earthworms. A worm's body is made up of about 250 segments, so those lines. Without worms, the soil would be wet, heavy, and hard to dig. Worm casts, the poop, are very good for the garden. The soil in them is very fine and has valuable food from plants. We knew that. Worms have blood but no heart. That might be a new fact. They have blood, but they don't have a heart. Fish like to eat juicy worms. That's why fishers use worms as bait. People that are going out fishing, they use them as bait. Every crumb of soil, are you ready for this? Every crumb of soil in parks and gardens has passed through the body of a worm. That's my favorite worm fact. I'm going to read it one more time. Every crumb of soil in parks and gardens has passed through the body of a worm. I find that so interesting. And I hope that you enjoyed the story, Earthworms, nonfiction, filled with lots of information. I hope that you learned something different from this book, okay? And I will see you tomorrow. Bye, boys and girls.